All of us Freemasons would like to think that the reissuance of this encyclical and Albert Pike's answer are merely a historical study of the past of a document issued some 75 years ago. Unfortunately, the condemnations of the Roman Catholic Church against Freemasonry continue even into our day. They are taught in all the Catholic schools of the United States and of the world, and pamphlets condemning Freemasonry can be found now inside the doors of almost every Catholic church in the United States. Very few Masons realize that Catholic magazines and textbooks constantly refer contemptuously to Masonry with the purpose of making Catholic children and adults feel that Freemasons in the United States are the enemies not only of their church but of religion itself. The National Catholic Almanac is available in Catholic libraries and Catholic schools across the country. In the 1962 edition, it paints this description for Catholic children and adults, and this is a direct quote. Freemasonry is an international fraternity diametrically opposed to Christianity, which professes to represent a primitive, naturalistic religion that denies the supernatural and accepts nothing of what God has revealed in the Scripture and tradition. The ultimate aim of Freemasonry is to establish a society and culture in which God and the supernatural have no part whatsoever. End of the quotation. Every man who has joined a Masonic lodge and every woman who has joined one of the orders affiliated with Masonry knows that this statement of the Catholic Church is a lie, and this article is just as mistaken and untrue when it continues in words that belittle the intelligence of every man who becomes a Mason. And these are the following words of the Almanac. Many American Masons find it difficult to understand the Church's attitude. The majority of them advance no higher than the third degree or Blue Lodge status and have no personal antagonism towards the Church. They merely join the Masons for social and business reasons. They do not realize the record of official hostility of the organization towards the Church, or they do not understand the real aims and purposes of that organization. The cause of American democracy and American Freemasonry were identical in 1776. The cause of American democracy and American Freemasonry are the same in 1963. As Freemasonry was the bulwark upon which democracy was founded, and Freemasons were foremost in the battle to establish them, so Masonry and Masons are the sole hope of preserving those ideals. Most of us are prone to assume that because we have always known freedom, that we and our children and our children's children will always continue to enjoy it. It was Abraham Lincoln who, in that great Gettysburg Address, expressed the thought as to whether or not this nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. Abraham Lincoln was a student of history, of political history. He knew that all democracies and republics of ancient times had been stolen from the people, and that when people became too tolerant, dictatorships took over and all freedom was crushed. All Americans, and especially American Masons, are aware of the threat of communism. We know that wherever it has obtained power, it has destroyed freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of writing, freedom of worship. Therefore, it has destroyed Masonry. But not all Masons realize that within our nation, too, and totally aside from the danger of communism, there are other threats to those freedoms. One of these threats is censorship. Throughout our country, a form of censorship, it strongly approaches the censorship of Spain, Portugal, and other countries where the Roman Catholic Church has control of the press. The American press is as subservient to the whims of the Roman Catholic hierarchy as if it were owned by them. It covered the pageantry and speeches of the Vatican Ecumenical Council as carefully, if not more so, than it does the Congress of the United States. National or international or local incidents that might mar the good, maternal, benevolent, learned image of Catholicism in America are forbidden to go across the news wires or to appear in print. Local publishers and editors are afraid that any criticism of the church may cost them a loss of advertising or a loss of subscriptions. Some have felt the sting of Roman Catholic boycott when they have dared to criticize. Many of them will not even accept paid advertisements for rallies of speakers like myself, known to be critical of the Catholic Church. The major newspapers of the country were afraid to accept paid advertisements for 2 of my books because the words Catholic Church were included in the titles. Every Masonic official knows how difficult it is to get adequate publicity for Masonic events, either those conducted by the Grand Lodges of the states or individual lodge functions and events. Through the National Organization for Decent Literature, commonly called NODL, the Catholic Church claims the right to censor all paperback books published in the United States. It goes so far as to present lists of acceptable books in the paperback field to drugstores, grocery stores, bus and railroad stations. It threatens to publish boycott lists of stores that carry paperback books of which it disapproves. How it can reconcile these tactics of suppression of freedom of speech with its boasted adherence to American democracy is very difficult to realize. In the field of motion pictures, radio, television, the Catholic Church exercises a double censorship. It effectively stops any subject matter which even constructively criticizes the Church, and it encourages the presentation of pro-Catholic material that is so obviously partisan that it becomes nauseating. It is the duty of Freemasons everywhere to oppose this censorship. They should protest at least as vigorously as Roman Catholics do in the struggle to see that positive Protestant, Jewish, and Masonic events are publicized, and to see that all means of communication remain free for the publication of the truth, no matter how unpleasant that truth might be. Another battlefront upon which Freemasons must take their stand is the preservation of the public school system of America. The Supreme Council of the 33rd degree favors, above all things, the American public school, nonpartisan, nonsectarian, efficient, democratic, for all the children of all the people. This same ideal is the professed concern of every Blue Lodge as well. We must not only give speeches during Public School Week on the value of the public school system in the preservation of democracy, but we must remain always watchful as Masons to see that our public school boards do not come under the influence of any church or denomination. There should be at least one Mason on every public school board in the United States. The nature of the organization of our Blue Lodges, established as they are in practically every community of the nation, no matter how small, makes this vigilance over our school boards not only a duty, but a very easy duty to carry out. In all too many parts of the United States, such as in New England, the Catholic Church has taken over the public school boards. It has infiltrated our public schools with Catholic teachers and has established such control over textbooks, especially history textbooks, that the Catholic Church is being portrayed as the founder and defender of American democracy. All of this is part of its effort to create a benevolent, democratic image of an organization that has been really a dictatorship ever since it was established. In many communities in the country, the Catholic Church has not only taken control of school boards, but it has closed down public schools and declared Catholic parochial schools to be the public schools of those districts, and has put the teaching nuns on the payroll. To add further insult to injury, the Internal Revenue Service has declared that the salaries that these nuns receive as public school teachers are not subject to income tax. These abuses are not an isolated thing. They are not only true of most New England states, they are also true in parts of New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Illinois, Kentucky, Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, and many other states. In some places, the Church has even been able to infiltrate public school textbooks with Roman Catholic doctrine. An example of this is in the text Medical and Surgical Nursing, by Amy Frances Brown, which was used in the Fresno State College School of Nursing. This school is a branch of the University of California. Non-Catholic student nurses in that state institution were taught the Catholic doctrine regarding birth control, artificial insemination, and abortion. These are the exact words of that text. By the moral law, no instruction on the method of using contraceptives of any type may be given to any person, regardless of religion, by a doctor or a nurse without committing a gravely immoral act. To do so would constitute formal cooperation in the sin. Requests for such information must be refused. It is hard to conceive of George Washington, John Hancock, or Benjamin Franklin, with their passion for liberty and freedom, permitting such church doctrines to be taught in the public schools. The ideals and the watchfulness of modern Masons must be just as careful. A third and equally important problem to which every Mason in America must dedicate himself is the question of public tax aid for Catholic parochial schools. 75 years ago, the great Masonic leader Albert Pike, in answering the condemning encyclical of Pope Leo XIII, pointed out prophetically the campaign of the Catholic Church as he said, "In the United States and elsewhere, it will try to obtain for the Catholic clergy the control, so far as it can be done, of the public education of the young, and of a share of the funds furnished for that purpose by the public." President Kennedy has declared that federal tax funds for private parochial schools is unconstitutional. Congress has backed him up by refusing to vote these funds. The Catholic hierarchy has retaliated by a show of power in seeing to it that no schools will get any federal tax funds if Catholic schools cannot get them. It has threatened to continue this opposition unless it gets its unconstitutional share of public tax money. An important aspect of this battle of the Catholic hierarchy for tax funds for its own educational system is the fact that this attack is not confined to the United States. It is going on all around the world, in every country outside the Iron Curtain. The Catholic Church maintains, through the encyclicals of its popes and the teachings of its leaders, particularly of the Jesuits, that the Catholic Church alone, being the only one true church, has the right to educate the youth of the world, and that every nation on earth has the obligation of assisting in this educational program of Catholicism, either by teaching the Catholic religion in the public schools of that nation, or by paying the Catholic Church itself so that it can teach the Catholic religion in its own private schools. In all Catholic countries with which the Vatican has a concordat, this stipulation is provided. In those countries, the textbooks must all be approved by the Roman Catholic bishops, and so also must the teachers. This is true, for example, in Colombia, where our own United States government is furnishing the money to build the classrooms in which the Catholic Church will pick the textbooks and approve the teachers. The battle for state aid for Catholic schools has been won by the Church in Canada, England, Scotland, Ireland, Holland, Belgium, West Germany, and in France. The Church is even rising up to try to regain Catholic control of schools in Mexico, where the abuses of the Church 100 years ago resulted in the Ley de la Reforma, the law of the reform, by that great Freemason Benito Juarez, who broke the Church's stranglehold on that nation. The only countries in the world today, outside the Iron Curtain, where the Catholic Church does not yet have state aid for its parochial schools, are New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. It will never give up the fight within the United States. The educational leaders of the Church, particularly the Jesuits, will continue to mesmerize and hypnotize the Catholic people into thinking that this is a fight for their rights as parents, instead of being the fight that it really is, the fight for the supremacy of the hierarchy itself. They will continue to intimidate with political pressures our congressmen until they get tax aid for parochial schools or are soundly defeated in the attempt. One Jesuit college president, Father Leary of Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington, has made the statement that within 50 years the majority of babies born in the United States will be Catholics, and that by that time the problem of federal aid to Catholic parochial schools will be solved, as he said, by the strange combination of numbers and of time. In other words, the Jesuits do not care about the Constitution of the United States in this struggle for United States tax money for Jesuit schools. They certainly bear out the provisions of the fourth vow of their order, the vow of complete superlative obedience to the Pope and to the General of the Jesuit order. It is not a pledge of allegiance to the United States of America. And we should never forget that most of the Catholic colleges in the United States are Jesuit schools. Every Mason should subscribe to a Catholic weekly newspaper, preferably the local Catholic paper of the area in which he lives. He can then observe for himself that every week the Catholic papers, through their syndicated National Catholic Welfare Conference news service, keep hammering away at the issue of public tax aid for Catholic parochial schools. They keep screaming discrimination in their headlines and have twisted the entire picture around to the point where Masons and other non-Catholics who do not support the parochial private school system are branded in the eyes of their fellow Catholic citizens as discriminatory and un-Americans and promoting a hate campaign. The seriousness of this present Catholic press campaign can be realized by the figures in the official Catholic Almanac, which states that the 506 Catholic publications in the United States have a total circulation of 27,560,000 copies. Masons must really wake up and fight back if they expect to overcome a campaign like this. At the present time, there are 6.5 million American children in Catholic parochial schools. The Church admits that only half of its children are in these church schools. If it can get our tax aid, it will have 13 million American children, all being taught the words of the National Catholic Almanac, that Freemasonry is an international fraternity diametrically opposed to Christianity, which professes to represent a primitive naturalistic religion that denies the supernatural and accepts nothing of what God has revealed in scriptures and tradition. All of these children will have drilled into their very receptive young minds the evil poison that the Catholic Church is spreading in these words: the ultimate aim of Masonry is to establish a society and culture in which God and the supernatural have no part whatsoever. Are you, as Masons, so tolerant that you are willing, through your taxes, to pay to have these lies taught about you? Can Freemasons, worthy of the name, worthy of the obligations of their degrees, or worthy of the heritage of the freedom of Washington, Franklin, Jefferson, Benito Juarez, Simon Bolivar, and Jose Marti, can thinking Masons rest complacently and be tolerant in the face of dangers like this? Harveyixon, in the February 1963 issue of the New Age magazine, pens these very truthful words: "Never in the history of mankind is the inculcation and implementation of the principles and ideals of Masonry so important, and yet apathy, indifference, and complacency is common even within our own ranks. In the name of tolerance, we excuse and overlook many crimes and abuses against which we should be forever aggressively intolerant. There is sovereign virtue in great doses of intolerance. The Declaration of Independence breathes intolerance in every line, and the greatest intolerance of all intolerance is intolerance for everything which is subversive to Masonic and American principles." And Harveyixon continues, "If Masonry is to continue to exist and to be effective, we must soon relinquish passive principles and become an aggressive vital force to this nation and among its people. Masonry, by its very origin, has no choice. It must be a living, breathing force. Masonry must act through a body of idealistic men applying Masonic principles to a way of life and bringing about that very accomplishment. We must have Masons in the desperate 60s who will match in fortitude and courage those who faced the rack of the Inquisition and the Saracen in the Holy Land. All of us who are Masons must give careful and perhaps shameful pause to the words of one of our greatest living Masonic leaders in the United States today, and these are his words. The demonstration of either apathy or fear on the part of the vast majority of Blue Lodge Masons has disturbed me no end. I do not know the secret of rousing Masons in this country to an awareness of the several threats that now face us and the dangers that are all too evident regarding our future. One of the things we are met with continually is the inability of Masons to understand that the Constitution of the United States is not controversial, and that if they are to be worthy of their membership in Masonry, they must understand that they cannot turn their heads with the expectation that our problems will vanish. In New York State, another Masonic leader has said this: "Our mission is to keep America free. Catholicism can win America and reduce it to the status of Spain, Ireland, or Colombia only if we forget or neglect to preserve our heritage of freedom. Whether or not this happens depends upon all Masons being alert and faithful to their convictions and ready to struggle and win liberty over again in each and every generation."